Printing in vase mode is a very useful technique to use when 3D printing chocolate. It produces very thin-walled, delicate prints that can be used as is or that can be filled with another confection. Let's take a look at the basics of designing for 3D printing in vase mode. First, let's examine what vase mode printing is. Vase mode printing is also sometimes referred to as spiralized outer contour printing, and that description is actually more accurate. To conceptualize how vase mode printing works, think of a slinky, indicated by this spring model here. The printer, after printing the bottom flat layer of the model, starts printing the walls, the outer contour of the solid model in one continuous spiral. I can indicate that more accurately by decreasing the offset here, and I'll also increase the number of rotations so you get a better idea of what a vase would look like. So you can see we've designed a very basic cylindrical vase. Now let's see how to model this shape in Tinkercad. I'll drag this shape aside, and I'm going to choose the cylinder, bring it out. If I tap the F key on my keyboard, I can zoom in to the shape. You can see that the resolution of the cylinder is quite low. You can see the individual facets on the side of the cylinder, but I can smooth that out by clicking on the sides slider and dragging it all the way to the right. Increase the number of facets so that it essentially makes the cylinder nice and smooth. Now I'll make the cylinder the same size as my original model, 60 by 60. Zoom out by 60 millimeters tall, and if I drag that over, you can see that indeed that's about the same size. So the qualities that you're looking for in a vase mode model are a flat top and a flat bottom and nearly vertical sides. You also don't want to have any interior holes, and we'll see why when we slice this model. First, I'm going to change the name. Then I'll click on the orange cylinder, click Export as STL. In my Downloads folder, we see the vase model that I just exported. I'm going to change the name to Cylinder Vase. Now I'm going to open Prusa Slicer and click the Add icon and choose the Cylinder Vase and click Open. First, I'm going to quickly verify that I'm using the CocoaPress 0.8 millimeter nozzle with a 0.5 millimeter layer height. Now, these next few settings that I'm going to change are crucial in order to print in vase mode. We'll click on Print Settings at the top, and then under Layers and Perimeters, Vertical Shells, notice that there's a Spiral Vase option. We'll click that box, and it tells us that it's going to print with one perimeter, a single wall. There'll be no solid top layers, 0% infill, no support material. So we'll say yes. And it will make several other changes. Notice here, no top solid layers. The default is 2 bottom solid layers, but to make sure that we get a nice solid bottom, I'm going to add one more layer. So I have 3 bottom layers. And for the first layer height, I'm going to change that from 0.4 to 0.5 to ensure that we get a nice firm grip on the print bed for the first couple layers. I'll click Plater to go back to the plater. And at the bottom, I'll click the Slice Preview button. And we can see the layers of the print. You can use the slider on the side to go layer by layer. And on the bottom right, we can see that this print will take 23 minutes to print, and it will use a little under 17 grams of chocolate. Now, if I wanted to print this model, I would click Export G-code on the bottom right. And you can see that the file name, Cylinder Vase, includes information about the nozzle, 0.8 millimeter nozzle, the time it will take to print, 23 minutes, and it will use 17 grams of chocolate. So I would save this to my SD card, plug the SD card into the CocoaPress chocolate printer, and follow the printing instructions described in an earlier video. For now, I'll click Cancel, and on the bottom left, I'll click the editor icon to go back to the editor, and then with the model highlighted, I'll choose Edit and Delete Selected. So we know the cylinder will work. What about a cube? Let's try bringing out the cube. We'll make the dimensions similar to the cylinder, 60 by 60 by 60, and export it as STL. Change the file name to Cube Vase. In Prusa Slicer, we'll add the cube vase model. We can click Print Settings to make sure that the first layer height is still 0.5, vase mode is selected, and that there are 3 bottom layers. We haven't closed Prusa Slicer since our last model was sliced, so it retains the settings that we changed previously. I'll click Print Preview, and once again, we can see we have the desired effect. We have a hollow vase shape with a solid bottom. This model will print in 30 minutes, and it will use just under 22 grams of chocolate. I'll click the editor icon to go back to the editor view, make sure the model is selected, and then I can delete it. So we know that the cylinder and the cube will work. What about the sphere? We'll drag that out, change the dimensions so that it's about the same size as the other models, and I'll export it as an STL, change the name, and import it into Prusa Slicer. Click Slice Preview, and right away we can see that there's a problem. If you look at the top, you can see that those layers are not touching at all. So the chocolate would just fall right into the center of the sphere. And if we go down to the bottom, we can see that a similar thing is happening here. These layers are not connected at all. In fact, you can see right through them. So this print would clearly fail. And in fact, we have a warning message at the bottom which clues us in, but you won't always get that message. So you need to really inspect the model to see if you can see daylight through the layers. And if you can, that means that the layers aren't sticking together, and that print will fail. Close that, go back to editor view, delete this model, return to Tinkercad. We know the sphere won't work, so we'll delete that. Scribble is a special case. We're not going to cover right now. What about the roof? This has straight sides, front and back, and it has a flat bottom. It doesn't have a flat top, but it's angled. So we suspect this might not work, but let's verify to make sure. So 60 by 60, and the height is half of that, 30. I'll export as STL, change the name. In Prusa Slicer, I'll add the roof face model and click Slice Preview. Okay, so this appears to be okay. If we zoom in, we can see the top has a gap, but that might be okay. If I start looking at individual layers, though, and I zoom in and rotate around, you see what's happening? I can actually see that back wall through the angled layers of this model. So those layers are not touching enough. They're not laying directly on top of one another, and so it's likely that this print would also fail. And see, I have no error message at the bottom, but nevertheless, this model would likely fail when being printed in chocolate. I'll go back to the editor view, click to delete the model. Back in Tinkercad, I can delete the roof model because I know that won't work. Now, I'm not going to slice all of the models, but you can make an educated guess at this point as to which ones would work. This cone shape would likely not work, again, because of the angled nature of its shape. This round roof would also likely not work because the top part is angled too steeply. Text is a special case that we'll cover in a future video. This wedge shape would likely not work because it's similar to the roof in that it has an angled side. Similarly with the pyramid. The half sphere, we know, would not work because the regular sphere didn't work. The layers on the top were not connected. What about this polygon? It has straight sides and a flat top and bottom. Well, let's take it out and I'll increase it to about the size of these other shapes, and then we'll export it as an STL file. We'll rename it. Open it in Prusa Slicer, Polygon Vase, open, click Slice Preview, and it appears to be okay. But again, we'll go in close and we'll move around, zoom right in and carefully inspect all the layers. Because these are completely vertical, each layer is resting on top of the previous layer, this should be fine. This looks good. So this will work. I'll go back to Edit View, remove the model. Back in Tinkercad, we'll save the shape because we know that one will work. Continuing on, the paraboloid will likely not work for the same reason that the sphere and half sphere don't work because of the rounded top. But torus, if you don't know what a torus is, I'll drag it out and we'll take a closer look. So the torus is basically a ring with a hollow middle. So this has a number of problems for vase mode printing. If we look at it from the side, you can see that it has angled bottom and tops, and it also has a hole in the middle. So this shape will likely not work. Get rid of that. What about the tube? I'll change the dimensions so that it's similar to our other shapes. 60 by 60 by 60 tall. Okay. Again, notice that it has rough facets on the side, so I can choose the side slider, move it all the way to the right to smooth that shape. So will this print in vase mode? It has a flat top and a flat bottom, has vertical sides, so that's all okay, but it has a hole in the middle. So will this or will not work? Let's try it and see. I'll export as STL, change the name, open it in Prusa Slicer, tube vase. There we go. Click the slice preview button, and it looks like it worked. Looks like it did the same thing that it did for the cylinder, but if you rotate, you'll see that, in fact, it didn't do exactly the same thing. It's going to print the bottom solid piece of the model, and it will print the outer contour, but not the inner contour. And the reason is because the way spiral vase mode works is the nozzle moves in one continuous motion. It's not going to jump back and forth between the outer wall and the inner wall. So you might consider this a failure, but the print will actually complete. It just won't have the inner wall. And so there may be a time when that's the effect you desire, but just know that ahead of time. So once again, we'll remove this model and return to Tinkercad. So the tube is a question mark. The print will succeed, but not in the way that you might expect. The heart is next. The shape has a flat top and a flat bottom. There are no holes in the middle, and it's not angled in any way. It just has a concave section, the top middle of the heart, and convex, the rounded parts of the heart, but that should be okay. But once again, we can verify quickly and easily by opening up the model in Prusa Slicer and clicking Slice Preview, and we can see that in fact the model will print as expected. We have a solid bottom and we have a single outer contour. This particular model is interesting because it shows that you're not limited to plain, square, or round outer contours. You can combine convex sections with concave sections and more convex sections. So with some clever design, you can create quite complex vase mode shapes. And we'll explore that in a later video. But for now, we'll remove this model, return to Tinkercad. The heart is good. We can guess that this first star shape will not work because of the angled top sections. We can also guess that this other star shape will work because it has a flat top and a flat bottom, straight vertical sides, and the fact that the points of the star are convex and concave, convex, concave, as with the heart, will not make any difference. You'll end up with a flat bottom and a single outer wall for the star. The icosahedron won't work because of the angled facets on the top and at the bottom. The ring will not work for the same reason that the torus didn't work. It has angled sections on the top and the bottom. Similarly, the dice won't work because of the angled facets on the top and the bottom in the corners. And the diamond will also not work for the same reason. So we've gone through all the basic shapes in Tinkercad, and we know that the 5 basic shapes of the cylinder, the cube, the polygon, the heart, and the star will work, and to a lesser degree, the tube will work as well, but in a kind of odd way. In a later video, we'll explore more complex shapes in Tinkercad for creating models intended to be printed in vase mode on the CocoaPress Chocolate 3D printer.